Some men seem ordinary, too ordinary, to ever make you look twice. Michael Parks was one of them. A neighbor, a husband, a man people trusted without question. No one saw the warning signs. No one heard the whispers behind closed doors. He smiled. He worked. He moved through his life as if nothing could ever go wrong. But beneath that ordinary surface, there was a plan. A careful, deliberate sequence of decisions. And the world around him had no idea what was waiting, hidden in plain sight, behind the facade of a normal life. Michael Parks was about to cross a line that could never be undone. And no one, not friends, not family, not neighbors, would see it coming until it was too late. At first glance, Michael Parks was the kind of man you wouldn't think twice about. There was nothing in his appearance to suggest danger. His hair was always neatly combed, his clothes pressed and clean, his expression calm and measured. He smiled easily, laughed at the right moments, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who believed he belonged in the world without question. He was a husband, a neighbor, someone who could slip seamlessly into any social setting and never draw suspicion. People greeted him warmly, exchanged small talk on the street, and would later recall him as polite, helpful, unremarkable in the very best sense of the word. That ordinariness was his armor. It was what made him invisible, what allowed him to move through life unnoticed, while quietly observing the world around him and measuring it with a precision that no one suspected. Behind the surface of his ordinary routines, however, there was a meticulousness that belied the calm exterior. Every gesture, every word, every interaction seemed calculated, a subtle choreography designed to maintain appearances and conceal what was truly happening beneath the surface. He knew which truths to share, which to hide, and how to bend circumstances to his advantage without ever raising alarm. To the outside world, it was all perfectly natural. To Michael, it was control. The most dangerous thing about him was not a visible rage or sudden outburst. It was the quiet patience, the slow, deliberate calculation that allowed him to orchestrate the unimaginable while the world believed he was just living an ordinary life. There was a darkness beneath the calm, a precision in his actions, and an uncanny ability to hide it behind a mask of normality. And it was behind that mask that the events to come would unfold, leaving everyone who trusted him stunned and horrified. From the outside, the Parks home looked ordinary. The lawn was neat, curtains drawn at night, lights glowing softly in the evening. People passing by would have assumed it was a house of quiet comfort, maybe even happiness. Inside, it was different. Words snapped and ricocheted off the walls. Small disagreements escalated into sharp exchanges, voices rising and falling, leaving echoes that lingered long after the argument ended. Hope learned quickly to move carefully, to soften her voice, to weigh every gesture. Laughter became cautious, smiles measured. Fear seeped in quietly, like smoke filling a room, until it was impossible to ignore. Michael's control was invisible but absolute. He didn't yell. He didn't strike. He didn't need to. A glance, a tone, a subtle shift in his posture could direct Hope's actions without anyone else noticing. He had perfected the art of living beside her while bending her life to his will, making it seem natural, effortless, inevitable. The tension in the house was a living thing. It followed them through hallways, lingered in the kitchen, curled in the corners of the bedroom, And then came the silence. The kind of silence that comes after something changes irrevocably, when the weight of control, fear, and anticipation finally settles into the air itself. In that quiet, the ordinary life they had once shared no longer existed. It had been replaced by a structure of rules and restraints, and Michael Parks was the one holding every lever. Michael and Hope Parks lived a life that, to the outside world, seemed ordinary. They woke in the same house on South Elm Street, shared quiet breakfasts, and went about their routines with the careful rhythm of a married couple. Neighbors waved from across the street. Friends stopped by for casual visits. Everything was familiar, predictable, normal. And for years, it had been that way. They laughed together over small jokes, argued over trivial matters, and tucked themselves into the quiet safety of their home each night. There were cracks. Of course, tension in certain conversations, long silences after arguments, but nothing that anyone outside could see, nothing that hinted at the darkness waiting beneath the surface. Then came a day that should never have occurred. On August 18th, 2020, the ordinary rhythm of their lives was broken. The morning began like any other. Sunlight spilling through the curtains, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint smell of coffee brewing. But Michael was not moving through the day like the husband Hope thought she knew. His mind was elsewhere, calculating, measuring, anticipating. Each small action, each decision, was setting in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. Hope went about her day unaware. She laughed at something Michael said, went to check on a small task in the kitchen, adjusted the pillows in the living room. She had no reason to suspect that the life she believed was ordinary, safe, and predictable was about to be shattered. By nightfall, the house that had been their sanctuary would feel different, not immediately to the world outside, but inside its walls. Something irreversible would have occurred. A quiet, deliberate choice would be made, and the couple that had seemed ordinary, predictable, and safe would never again live as they had before. That day began like any other, and yet it ended in a way no one could have imagined. Michael Parks told the police that his wife Hope had been missing since August 18th. He described it plainly, almost rehearsed, as if the words themselves could shape reality. According to him, the day had started like any other, but it ended differently. An argument, sharp words exchanged, a door closing, and then Hope stepping outside. He said the last time he saw her, she had walked out of their house and climbed into a silver, or was it white, Honda, driven by someone he did not know. His story was calm, believable, neatly packaged. The kind of story designed to close the case before it had even begun. But beneath that calm surface, tension hung in the air. Something about the way Michael spoke, measured and precise, suggested there was more he wasn't saying, and the house itself seemed to remember. Small details lingered. A chair slightly moved, a faint scuff on the floor, the way the air felt heavier in certain rooms. Ordinary signs, invisible to the casual eye, but telling in their quiet persistence. Then, something happened that would change the course of the investigation entirely. Evidence began to surface: traces of blood, objects out of place, inconsistencies that could not be explained away. Items that should have been meaningless now whispered the truth of what had occurred inside that house. Questions arose that Michael could not answer, not without cracking the fragile facade he had built. Suddenly, the police were no longer dealing with a simple missing person report. The story Michael Parks had carefully constructed was starting to unravel. What had seemed ordinary, even believable, began to look suspicious. The investigation, which he thought would end before it began, was now moving toward clarity. And with every question asked, every subtle sign discovered, the truth edged closer, revealing that Hope Park's disappearance was not an accident, not a misunderstanding. It was something far more deliberate and far more chilling. On August 20th, 2020, a woman called police after spotting something hanging from a bridge. Officers arrived to find a body tied in place and missing its head. It was clear immediately this was deliberate, and it was meant to be found. The discovery sent investigators straight back to the house on South Elm Street. This time, they didn't need Michael Parks to explain anything. The house was already telling its story. Dried blood was pressed into the gravel near the garage. More stained the garage floor, marked by a clear shoe print. Outside, a thin trail of blood crossed the grass, as if something heavy had been dragged away. Inside the cellar, police found that the body was missing a human head, bearing a gunshot wound. Nearby lay a .22 caliber rifle, matching a spent casing found along the blood trail. In the bedroom, Hope's phone sat hidden inside a safe. A man's shoe matched the print left behind in the garage. The next day, more surfaced. A blood-stained tarp, strands of hair, plastic bags filled with soaked rags, all buried, not destroyed. By then, Michael's story was finished. He had tried to control the narrative, but the house remembered everything, and piece by piece, it exposed the truth he could no longer hide. For a while, Michael Parks stayed exactly as he had been from the beginning. Calm, polite, cooperative. He answered questions without raising his voice. He nodded when officers spoke. He listened carefully, as though he were helping them solve a problem that had nothing to do with him. But this time, the questions were different. Investigators no longer asked him where Hope might have gone. They asked him about blood, about the shoe print in the garage, about the rifle, about the phone hidden in the safe. Each detail was placed carefully on the table between them, one after another, not as accusations, but as facts. Michael tried to keep pace. He offered explanations, adjusted timelines, filled gaps with half-answers that sounded reasonable until they didn't. Small contradictions began to surface, moments where his story bent, then cracked. What he said earlier no longer matched what he was saying now. The calm he had relied on started to work against him. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. His pauses grew longer. His answers are more guarded. The confidence he once carried slipped, replaced by tension he could no longer hide. Investigators watched as the man who had reported his wife missing slowly became the man they were no longer willing to let leave. By then, the story of the disappearance was gone. In its place stood a growing certainty that Hope Parks had never left on her own. Michael Parks had believed he could control every detail, the timing, the narrative, the outcome, but the evidence told a different story, one he could no longer explain away. And in that quiet room, surrounded by facts instead of assumptions, Michael's version of events finally began to collapse under the weight of the truth. When police moved to arrest Michael Parks, there was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no tearful confessions. He walked with officers out of the house on South Elm Street, as calm as he had appeared throughout the investigation, his demeanor still composed, still measured. But this time, his composure offered no protection. Almost immediately after the evidence became undeniable, charges followed quickly and decisively. Prosecutors filed counts of murder, evidence tampering, and other offenses that transformed the story from a missing wife to a calculated killing. The narrative Michael once tried to shape the missing wife, the vague stranger in a silver Honda dissolved in the face of blood trails, print matches, and the truth buried under the cellar floor. In the interrogation room, his calm began to crack. Small inconsistencies in his statements, once brushed aside, now stood out like splinters. His efforts to control the narrative had only magnified the evidence against him. The more he talked, the tighter the noose seemed to tighten. By the time the courtroom proceedings began, there was no question who the defendant was or what he had done. In 2022, Michael Dale Parks stood before a judge, a quiet man whose ordinary exterior once masked something far darker, and pleaded guilty to the murder of his wife. The plea left no room for parole, no possibility of early release, and sealed his fate with a 50-year prison sentence. For the first time, the truth stood without filter, not softened by calm answers, not masked by rehearsed explanations. The narrative Michael thought he could outsmart had outlived him. Every attempt to conceal, every small choice to mislead, only made the truth clearer. And when the courtroom emptied, when the gavel fell, one thing remained unchanged. Hope Parks did not disappear. She was taken. Her life ended inside a home she believed was safe, by someone she had trusted. In the end, Michael Parks lost the control he had worked so carefully to maintain. The house spoke. The evidence endured. What remains is Hope's name, not as a missing person, not as a cautionary footnote, but as the center of a story that refuses to forget her.